I never thought I'd end up being someone's secret. Not in the casual way either. Not the "don't tell my parents" kind of secret. I mean the kind where someone looks over their shoulder before touching your hand. The kind where they smile at you differently when nobody's around, then act like you barely exist the second another person walks into the room. And the worst part? I still fell for him anyway. His name was Callum. We met because of a stupid plumbing leak in my apartment building. I just moved into this old converted warehouse downtown after finally getting out of a miserable relationship that left me emotionally wrecked and borderline broke. The place was cheap, exposed brick, squeaky floors, terrible insulation, but it was mine. At least until the ceiling above my bathroom started dripping brown water at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was standing there half asleep in boxers with a bucket when someone knocked on my door. Hard. I opened it expecting the landlord. Instead, I saw him. Tall, dark hoodie, wet hair like he just showered, broad shoulders filling the doorway, and those eyes, calm but intense at the same time. "You the new guy downstairs?" he asked. His voice was rough. "Sleepy. Yeah. You've got water leaking into your place too?" I blinked. "Wait, two?" He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Pipe burst in my bathroom. Landlord isn't answering." That was my introduction to Callum. We spent the next hour carrying towels and buckets around like exhausted idiots while water dripped through 2 floors of the building. Somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning, we ended up sitting on my kitchen counter eating stale crackers because neither of us had actual food. "I'm Bennett, by the way," I said. "Callum." He said it simply, like he didn't talk much. At first I assumed he was straight, not because he said anything specifically, it was just the vibe, the way he carried himself, quiet confidence, gym-built body, worn tattoos peeking under his sleeves. Plus, every few minutes his phone lit up with messages from girls. At least I assumed they were girls. I didn't ask. Honestly, I tried not to think about him that way at all. But that became difficult fast. Because after the pipe disaster, Callum kept showing up. Sometimes with coffee. Sometimes because the landlord still hasn't fixed the damage. Sometimes for no reason at all. A week later, we were basically hanging out every night. We'd sit on the fire escape smoking, even though I kept telling myself I quit. He'd steal bites off my plate when I ordered takeout. He'd stretch out across my couch like he lived there already. And every single time he got close to me, my brain stopped functioning properly. "You always stare this much?" he asked one night. I nearly choked on my drink. "What?" He smirked without looking away from the TV. "You keep zoning out. You're full of yourself. Didn't say I minded." That smile messed me up more than I wanted to admit. The thing about Callum was that he acted different when we were alone. Softer. Not soft exactly, just real. Like the version of him everyone else got wasn't the actual version at all. Around other people he became colder, more distant. His jaw tightened. His voice flattened out. I noticed it the first time I met his friends. We were at some crowded rooftop party one Friday night. Callum had invited me after casually mentioning he was going anyway. "You should come," he'd said. Simple as that. But the second we got there, something changed. He barely looked at me. At first I thought I was imagining it. But then one of his friends asked how we knew each other. "This is Bennett," Callum said casually. "He lives downstairs." That was it. Lives downstairs. Not my friend, not the guy he spent almost every night with, not the person he texted constantly, just downstairs neighbor. I laughed it off at the time, but the weird feeling stayed in my stomach all night, especially when some blonde girl climbed into his lap later while everyone was drinking. I tried not to care, really, but seeing Callum's hand resting on her thigh while he avoided looking at me completely made my chest hurt in a way I hated. I ended up leaving early. I didn't even text him. Around midnight there was knocking at my door. I opened it already irritated. Callum stood there breathing hard like he'd taken the stairs 2 at a time. "Why'd you leave?" I crossed my arms. "You seemed busy." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't do that." Do what? This jealous thing. I stared at him in disbelief. You're unbelievable. He stepped into my apartment before I could stop him. You know that girl means nothing. I laughed once, bitter. Okay? His expression shifted then, less defensive, more frustrated. You're mad because I didn't act the same around my friends. I didn't answer, because he was right. Callum exhaled sharply and ran both hands through his hair. It's complicated. No, I said quietly. It's actually pretty simple. His eyes locked onto mine. The tension between us suddenly felt thick enough to choke on. You want me when nobody's watching, I said. That's the problem. For a second he didn't move, didn't speak. Then he crossed the room so fast it caught me off guard. His hand grabbed my jaw gently but firmly, and before I could think, he kissed me. Hard. My entire body froze. I could taste alcohol on his lips, feel the heat of his chest against mine, the way his fingers tightened slightly at the back of my neck, like he'd wanted to do this for a long time. And honestly, the second I kissed him back, I knew I was screwed. Because Callum kissed like someone holding himself back for years. The kiss lasted maybe 5 seconds, maybe 10, but it completely destroyed whatever normal thing existed between us before. Callum pulled back first. Not far. Just enough for me to see the panic flash across his face before he buried it again. His hand was still on my jaw. Mine were gripping his hoodie without me realizing it. Neither of us spoke. The city noise outside filled the silence instead. Distant sirens, someone yelling down on the street, music leaking through the walls from another apartment. Then Callum swallowed hard and muttered, "Damn, I should have pushed him away. I should have asked him what the hell that was supposed to mean after ignoring me all night. Instead, I kissed him again, slower this time. And the second Callum made that low sound in his throat, like he'd finally stopped fighting himself, I knew this wasn't just some drunk mistake. His hands slid around my waist, pulling me closer until our bodies pressed together fully. The tension between us had been building for weeks, maybe longer. Now it was impossible to ignore. Bennett. He breathed against my mouth. I hated how good my name sounded coming from him. He rested his forehead against mine for a second, eyes closed, like he was trying to steady himself. This can't happen. I actually laughed. You literally started it. I know. Then what are you talking about? His jaw tightened. You don't get it. There it was again, that wall. Every time things became real, Callum pulled back behind it. I stepped away from him before I could stop myself. No, actually, I think I do get it. His expression darkened instantly. Don't. You act like two completely different people depending on who's around. Bennett, you kissed me, Callum. He looked away. That hurt more than if he denied it. For a few seconds, either of us moved. Then he quietly said, I've never done this before. I blinked. What? With a guy. The anger inside me softened immediately despite myself. Callum sat down heavily on the edge of my couch, elbows on his knees. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. For the first time since I met him, he looked genuinely nervous. Not guarded, not cool, just nervous. I sat beside him slowly. You could have fooled me. That made him snort quietly. Then silence settled again. His knee brushed mine. Neither of us moved away. I'm not ashamed of you, he finally said, but he stared at the floor for a long moment before answering. My family's complicated. Complicated how? You ever grow up around people who you feel like one wrong move changes everything? I didn't answer immediately, because honestly, yeah. He leaned back into the couch with a tired sigh. My dad's the kind of guy who thinks men should act like men all the time. My brothers are worse. His mouth twisted bitterly. The people I grew up around would lose their minds over this. This meaning me, meaning us. Callum rubbed his face roughly. I spent years making sure nobody questioned me. Girls, sports, fights, whatever people expected. And now, his eyes lifted to mine slowly. Now I can't stop thinking about you. That hit me so hard, I forgot how to breathe for a second. The honesty in his voice felt dangerous, real. I could tell he hadn't planned on admitting any of this tonight, maybe ever. "You know what the worst part is?" he asked quietly. "What?" "When I'm around everyone else, I still panic." I stayed silent. "Like tonight," he continued. "The second my friends showed up, my brain immediately went into defense mode. That blonde girl? She's dated half the city." I stared at him. "You're really helping your case here." A grin almost appeared on his face before fading again. "I hated watching you leave." "Then why didn't you stop me?" "Because I didn't know how." Something about that answer felt painfully honest. Callum wasn't trying to manipulate me. He was terrified, and somehow that almost made things worse, because it meant this wasn't temporary. It mattered to him too. He leaned closer again slowly, watching my face carefully this time, like he was giving me a chance to stop him. I didn't. His lips brushed mine softly, completely different from before, gentle, careful, like he was still learning me. My hand slid into his hair without thinking, and the second I tugged lightly, Callum exhaled sharply against my mouth. That sound nearly ruined me. His arm wrapped around my waist again, pulling me into his lap this time. "Jesus Christ," he muttered quietly, "you make me lose my mind." I smiled against his lips. "You're dramatic. You have no idea." We kept kissing until sometime after 2 o'clock in the morning, slowly, messily, like two people trying to figure something out without saying it out loud. At one point, Callum rested his head against my shoulder while I played with his fingers absent-mindedly. The intimacy of that somehow felt bigger than the kissing itself. "You going to regret this tomorrow?" I asked eventually. He answered too fast. "No." Then after a pause, "I'll probably panic tomorrow, though." I laughed softly. "Good to know." He tilted his head back to look at me. "I'm serious, Bennett." "I know. You should probably stay away from me." That surprised me enough to make me frown. "What?" Callum's expression looked frustrated again, but this time mostly with himself. "I already know I'm going to mess this up somehow." There was something almost sad about the way he said it, like he genuinely believed it. I studied his face quietly for a second before asking, "Why are you so convinced you don't deserve this?" That question hit him hard. I could tell immediately. His entire body went still. Then he looked away again. "I'm not good at being vulnerable." "You don't say." He smirked faintly at that, but it faded quickly. "My whole life I've had people expecting me to be someone specific." He shrugged slightly. "After a while you just become that person automatically. And who are you when nobody's around?" His eyes met mine again. "You already know." The way he looked at me after saying that made my chest ache, because suddenly I understood something terrifying. Callum only let himself be real with me, and somehow that felt both special and heartbreaking at the same time. The next morning felt weirdly normal. That almost made it worse. I woke up on my couch with Callum asleep beside me, one arm stretched across my stomach like he'd put it there unconsciously during the night. For a few seconds I just stared at him. Morning light softened everything about his face. Without the guarded expression he usually wore, he looked younger somehow, peaceful. It hit me then how rarely Callum actually relaxed around anyone. Even sleeping beside me seemed accidental, careful, temporary. I shifted slightly and his eyes opened immediately, instantly alert, like he was trained to wake up ready for something bad. For half a second he looked confused. Then he remembered where he was, and who he was holding. His entire expression changed. Not cold exactly, just nervous. "Morning," I said quietly. Callum blinked a few times before rubbing his face. "Morning." He sat up slowly, hoodie wrinkled, hair completely messed up. It should have looked ridiculous. Instead, he somehow still looked unfairly attractive. I smiled a little. "You panic yet?" That earned me a glare. "Don't start." I laughed softly and stood to make coffee. The tension between us felt different today, less explosive, more uncertain, like we'd crossed a line neither of us knew how to uncross now. Callum stayed unusually quiet while I moved around the kitchen. Eventually he asked, "You working today?" "Late shift." He nodded slowly. Then silence again. I finally turned toward him fully. "Okay, what's happening in your head right now?" He leaned back against the couch with a frustrated sigh. "Honestly? Usually." His eyes flicked up to mine. "I keep expecting this to feel wrong." That hurt more than I think he intended, because he noticed immediately. "No, that's not what I mean." "Then what do you mean?" Callum looked genuinely annoyed with himself now. "I mean," he struggled for the words, "my whole life I've been told this kind of thing is wrong, so I keep waiting for that feeling to hit." "And it hasn't?" He stared at me for a long second. "No." The honesty in his voice made my chest tighten again. He looked almost angry about it, like the fact he wanted this so badly was ruining every excuse he'd built for himself. I handed him coffee carefully. Our fingers brushed. Even that tiny touch still carried too much electricity. "You know," I said quietly, "you don't have to figure your entire life out overnight." Callum gave me a tired smile. "You make everything sound simple." "It usually is simple. People just complicate it." "That's easy for you to say." I frowned slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You've already accepted who you are." The way he said it made me pause, because he sounded almost jealous. I sat beside him again. It wasn't exactly easy for me either. His eyes lifted. I rarely talked about this stuff, but something about Callum made honesty feel unavoidable. My parents didn't speak to me for almost a year after I came out. His expression changed immediately. "What?" I shrugged lightly, trying to act less affected than I still was. "My dad took it badly. My mom just followed his lead." "Bennett." "They came around eventually. Sort of." I stared into my coffee. "But yeah, I know what it's like being terrified people will look at you differently." Callum stayed quiet for a long moment, then quietly asked, "Was it worth it?" I looked at him. "What? Telling people?" That question sat heavily between us, because I knew what he was really asking. I thought carefully before answering. "Yes." His jaw tightened slightly. "Even after everything?" "Yes." "Why?" I held his gaze. "Because pretending to be someone else gets exhausting." That hit him hard enough, he looked away again. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed loudly on the couch cushion beside him. He glanced at it, then immediately flipped it face down. Too fast, too guilty, I noticed. "Who was that?" "No one. Callum." He exhaled sharply through his nose. "My brother." "And?" "He wants me at dinner tonight." The tension in his voice told me everything already. Family, pressure, expectations. I nodded slowly. "Okay." Callum studied me carefully. "You're already thinking something." "I'm not." "You get this look." I smirked slightly. "What look?" "Like you're trying not to call me an idiot." That actually made me laugh. "Maybe because you're acting like one." He rolled his eyes, but there was no real irritation behind it. I hesitated before asking, "Have you ever dated anyone seriously?" "Girls?" The fact he specified girls made my stomach flip stupidly. "Yeah, a few." "Ever actually love one?" He went quiet. That answer alone told me enough. "You?" he asked. I shrugged. "Once. What happened?" "He loved me when we were alone," I said before I could stop myself. Callum froze. Oops. The implication hit both of us instantly. I saw guilt flash across his face. "Bennett, I'm not saying you're him, but you think I could become him?" I didn't answer, because honestly, yeah, that scared me. Callum leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees. "I don't want to hide you." I studied him carefully. "But," his voice lowered, "I just don't know how not to." That honesty ruined me a little, because he sounded genuinely ashamed of it. Not defensive, ashamed. I moved closer without really thinking. My knee brushed his. Then my hand found his quietly. Callum looked down at our fingers like the simple act of holding hands meant something terrifying. Maybe it did. "I'm not asking you to come out tomorrow," I said softly. His shoulders loosened slightly. "But I'm also not going to pretend I'm just your downstairs neighbor forever." He nodded once, slowly, like he understood that completely. Then, before I could say anything else, Callum leaned over and rested his forehead against mine again. It was becoming his thing, that tiny moment of closeness before he kissed me. This kiss was softer than the others, sleepy, careful. His thumb brushed against my wrist while he held my hand, and something about that tiny gesture felt incredibly intimate. Not lust, not tension, just affection. And honestly, that scared me way more. Things with Callum became dangerous after that. Not dangerous in a dramatic way, dangerous in the quiet way, the kind where feelings sneak up on you before you realize how deep you're already in. For the next 2 weeks, he practically lived in my apartment. He'd come downstairs after work and collapse onto my couch with a tired sigh while I cooked. Sometimes he'd stand behind me in the kitchen with his arms loosely around my waist, pretending he just wanted to see what I was making. Mostly I think he just liked touching me. And honestly, I liked it too much. Around midnight, we'd end up tangled together watching terrible movies either of us paid attention to. Callum became softer with me every day, more affectionate, more comfortable. He started kissing me absent-mindedly in the middle of conversations. Started stealing my hoodies because apparently mine were better. Started falling asleep with his head on my chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. But the second anyone else entered the picture, everything changed. That part never got easier. One night, we were walking back from getting takeout when a guy across the street yelled Callum's name. Immediately, Callum stepped away from me. Not dramatically, just enough. Enough for it to hurt. His friend jogged over, smiling. "Yo, where have you been?" "Busy." The guy glanced at me. "Who's this?" Callum barely hesitated. "Bennett. He lives in my building." There it was again. My chest tightened instantly. The conversation lasted maybe 3 minutes, but Callum never looked at me once during it. Not once. Then his friend finally left, and we kept walking in silence. I could feel the frustration building inside me with every step. Finally, I stopped walking entirely. Callum looked back. "What? You really don't hear yourself, do you?" His expression fell immediately. "Bennett. No, seriously. You act like touching me in public might kill you. That's not fair. Isn't it?" He rubbed his face roughly. "There were people around." I laughed bitterly. "Exactly." Callum's jaw clenched. "You think this is easy for me?" "I think it's a lot easier for you than it is for me." That shut him up, because he knew I was right. He got to choose when I existed. I didn't. I turned away before I said something worse, but Callum grabbed my wrist gently. "Don't walk away." "Why not?" "Because I'm trying." I looked at him then, really looked at him, and honestly, he did look exhausted, like every interaction was a war happening inside his own head. "You know what the problem is?" I asked quietly. "What?" "You're only brave when we're alone." That one hit hard. I saw it immediately in his face. His grip loosened slightly around my wrist. "I know," he admitted quietly. The anger inside me faded a little at that, because Callum never denied his flaws. That was the frustrating part. He saw exactly what he was doing. He just didn't know how to stop. We ended up back at my apartment anyway, neither of us talking much. The tension between us felt heavy now instead of electric. Callum stood near the window staring outside while I unpacked food containers in silence. Finally, he muttered, "My brother asked if I'm seeing someone." I looked over, and I lied. Something about how guilty he sounded made my irritation crack slightly. "What did you say?" "That there's this girl from work." I shook my head slowly. "Do you even hear yourself?" "I know." "No, Callum, seriously." I turned toward him fully. "You made up a fake woman instead of just saying you like someone." His eyes finally met mine. "You think I don't hate myself for that?" The rawness in his voice caught me off guard. He looked genuinely miserable. Callum sat down heavily on the couch and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I spent my entire life becoming who people wanted. His voice sounded tired now. And now every time I try to be honest, it feels like I'm about to lose everything. I stayed quiet, because I understood that feeling more than I wanted to admit. He looked up at me carefully. But when I'm with you, he paused. That's the only time I don't feel like I'm pretending. God, that ruined me instantly. I sat beside him slowly. You know what hurts? I said quietly. What? I believe you. Callum's expression softened immediately. His hand found mine without hesitation this time. No fear, no panic, just instant. I don't want to hurt you, he admitted softly. Then stop acting like I'm something shameful. I'm trying. I know. That was the problem. I knew. I knew Callum cared about me. Honestly, by now, I was pretty sure he was falling for me. But fear still controlled him more than feelings did, and I didn't know how long I could survive being hidden. Callum leaned his head against my shoulder quietly. You ever think about leaving? He asked suddenly. What? This city. I frowned slightly. Sometimes. He nodded slowly. I think about it all the time. Why? His laugh sounded humorless. Because maybe if nobody knew me, this would all feel easier. That answer made my chest ache, because Callum genuinely believed the problem was where he existed, not the people around him. I turned slightly toward him. You know there's nothing wrong with you, right? He didn't answer. That silence told me enough. I lifted my hand and touched his jaw gently until he finally looked at me again. There's nothing wrong with you, I repeated. His eyes searched mine carefully, like he wanted desperately to believe me, but didn't fully know how. Then suddenly, he kissed me. Not desperate this time, not hesitant either, just emotional. His hands slid into my hair while he kissed me slowly, like he was trying to communicate something he still couldn't say out loud. I kissed him back immediately, and somewhere in the middle of it, Callum quietly whispered against my mouth, I'm scared all the time. That confession broke my heart a little, because for the first time, I realized something important. Callum wasn't hiding me because he was embarrassed of me. He was hiding because he genuinely didn't know how to survive being himself yet. After that night, something shifted between us again. Not bigger, just deeper. Callum stopped pretending with me entirely when we were alone. He became clingy in ways he probably didn't even realize. If I sat on the couch, he ended up next to me. If I cooked dinner, he hovered nearby, touching my waist absent-mindedly. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night with him holding on to me like he was afraid I might disappear. But outside my apartment, still hidden, still secret. And eventually that started eating at me more than I wanted to admit. The worst part was how natural it became, like we had two separate relationships, one real, one fake. A few days later, Callum asked if I wanted to come to a bar with some of his friends. I actually hesitated. He noticed immediately. You don't want to go. I looked at him carefully. Do you? Yeah. As what? His expression faltered slightly. There it was, that hesitation, that tiny pause before reality set in. As my friend, he admitted quietly. My chest tightened instantly. Callum saw it happen. Bennett, no, it's fine. It's not like that. Then what's it like? He looked frustrated again, mostly at himself. I'm trying to include you. You mean hide me in person? That stung him, I could tell. His shoulders dropped slightly. You know that's not fair, isn't it? The silence stretched too long. Finally, Callum muttered, You think this is easy for me either? I laughed softly without humor. No. I think it's easier for you than admitting the truth. That one landed hard enough he looked away completely. For a second I thought he might leave. Instead, he quietly said, Please come anyway. The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. Not because he wanted me there, because he sounded scared I'd say no. And honestly, I hated that I still wanted to go despite everything. So later that night, I found myself sitting beside Callum in some crowded downtown bar, pretending we were exactly what he told people we were. Friends. His arm rested along the back of my chair the entire night, close enough to almost touch me, but never actually doing it. That somehow felt worse. At one point, one of his friends leaned toward me laughing. "So how long you and Callum been boys?" Before I could answer, Callum casually said, "Few months. Bennett moved into the building." Again, always the building, like that was the safest version of me he could offer people. I smiled tightly and took another drink. As the night went on, I started noticing something strange, though. Callum watched me constantly. Anytime someone talked to me too long, his eyes flicked over immediately, especially men. At one point, some guy near the bar started flirting with me pretty openly while ordering drinks. Nothing serious, just harmless conversation. But the second the guy touched my arm while laughing, Callum appeared beside me instantly. "Ready to go?" he asked flatly. The guy glanced between us awkwardly. I nearly smiled, because Callum looked furious. Outside the bar, I finally turned toward him. "You know you're terrible at pretending not to care." His jaw clenched. "I didn't like him touching you. There were people around," I reminded him pointedly. Callum shot me a glare. "Not funny." I stepped closer slightly. "See, that's what drives me insane about you." "What? You get jealous like I'm yours?" My voice lowered, but only when nobody's paying attention. The cold air around us suddenly felt heavy. Callum stared at me for a long moment before speaking. "You are mine." The words came out quiet, immediate, like he didn't even mean to say them aloud. My heartbeat stumbled hard in my chest. Callum realized what he'd admitted a second later, but he didn't take it back. Instead, he stepped closer, too. Close enough that nobody walking past would realize how intimate the moment suddenly felt. He exhaled shakily. "I don't know how to do this yet." I looked at him carefully. "Do what?" "Be someone different." Something about that answer hurt, because loving me felt different to him, dangerous, unfamiliar, but also real enough he couldn't stop anymore. I softened slightly. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you've spent so long performing for everyone else that you forgot how to just exist." Callum laughed quietly under his breath. "That sounds like something you rehearsed." "Shut up." A small smile finally appeared on his face. God, I love that smile, especially because it was rare. He reached for my hand instinctively before stopping himself halfway. I noticed. He noticed me noticing, and for once he didn't pull away. Slowly, nervously, Callum intertwined our fingers right there on the sidewalk, in public. It was late, barely anyone around, but still, his entire body looked tense while he did it, like he expected the world to explode. I squeezed his hand gently. Nothing happened. Cars kept passing. People kept walking. The world stayed exactly the same. Callum stared down at our hands for a second, with a strange expression I couldn't fully read. Relief, maybe? Disbelief, too. Then quietly he said, "This feels terrifying, but—" His eyes lifted to mine. "But also kind of nice." I smiled despite myself. Wow, incredible progress. He rolled his eyes, but he didn't let go of my hand, not even walking all the way home. And honestly, that tiny, stupid moment on a random sidewalk felt bigger than every kiss before it. Things got better after that. Not perfect, but better. Callum started trying in small ways after the hand-holding thing. Tiny things most people wouldn't even notice, but I noticed all of them. Like how he stopped introducing me as just the guy downstairs. Now it became, "This is Bennett." Simple, still careful, but different. Or the way he'd sit closer to me around other people now, his knee touching mine under tables, his shoulder brushing mine casually, like he was testing how much closeness he could survive publicly. It was progress, slow progress, and honestly, I was proud of him for it, which made what happened next hurt even more. It started with a text, late Friday afternoon. "Mom's birthday dinner tonight, need you there. Jude." Callum stared at his phone for a long time after reading it. I noticed immediately. Bad? He sighed heavily and tossed the phone onto the couch. My family. That explained everything already. I sat beside him carefully. What happened? Nothing yet. Yet? The tension in his voice made my stomach tighten. You okay? He leaned back into the couch and closed his eyes briefly. No. That honesty worried me, because Callum usually pretended he was fine even when he clearly wasn't. I haven't seen all of them together in months, he admitted quietly. And my mom keeps asking if I'm bringing someone. I stayed silent. She thinks I'm dating some girl from work now because I panicked and lied. Right, I muttered. Callum rubbed his face roughly. I know it was stupid. I was scared. His eyes flicked toward me. That softened him immediately. I hate that you understand me so well. I smiled faintly. Somebody has to. He stared at me for a second too long after that, then quietly asked, Would it bother you if I went alone? That question hurt, not because I expected an invitation, but because of how guilty he sounded asking it. I looked down at my hands before answering honestly. Yeah. Callum's expression tightened immediately. But I get it, I added softly. No, you don't. What? You shouldn't have to get it. That surprised me enough. I looked back up. Callum looked genuinely upset now. With you it's always understanding, he muttered bitterly. You always make excuses for me. I'm not making excuses. Yes, you are, his voice lowered, and I don't deserve it half the time. The self-hatred in his tone caught me off guard. I reached over and touched his wrist gently. Hey, he looked away. I mean it, Bennett. You're trying. That doesn't automatically make me good for you. God. Sometimes Callum sounded so convinced he'd eventually ruin everything that it scared me. I squeezed his wrist lightly. You know what I think? What? I think you've spent your whole life hearing love has conditions. His eyes slowly lifted to mine. And now you don't know what to do with someone who isn't asking you to become somebody else first. The silence after that felt huge. Callum just stared at me. Then suddenly, he pulled me into his lap without warning and buried his face against my neck. I laughed softly in surprise. You dramatic idiot. Shut up. But his arms tightened around me anyway, and honestly, moments like this made it impossible not to fall harder for him, because when Callum let himself love openly, he loved completely. That night before leaving for dinner, he stood near my apartment door looking strangely nervous. You'll text me? I asked. Yeah, he hesitated, then quietly added, I wish I could bring you. That one hit deep, because he sounded sincere, not performative, not guilty, just honest. I walked over slowly until we stood chest to chest. You will someday. His eyes searched mine carefully. You really believe that? Yes. Why? I smiled faintly. Because you held my hand in public and acted like you survived a war afterward. That made him laugh for real. A quick, surprised laugh that lit up his whole face. God, I loved making him laugh. Then his expression softened again. You make me feel brave, he admitted quietly. Before I could answer, he kissed me. Slowly, emotionally, like he needed the reassurance before facing his family. And when he pulled away, his forehead rested against mine again. Always that. I'll be back later, he murmured. Okay. But the second he left, something uneasy settled in my chest, because deep down, I knew tonight was going to change something. Around 10:30, Callum finally texted me. Can I come over? That was it. No explanation. No joke afterward like usual. Just that. I replied immediately. Yeah. 20 minutes later, he was at my door. The second I opened it, I knew something happened. Callum looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. His shoulders were tense, jaw tight, eyes darker than usual like he'd been trapped inside his own head all night. I stepped aside quietly to let him in. He walked straight past me and dropped onto the couch heavily, elbows on his knees. I sat beside him carefully. What happened? For a while he didn't answer. Then finally, "My brother saw your name on my phone." My stomach tightened instantly. "And?" He asked who you were. The way Callum said it already told me this didn't end well. I stayed quiet. "At first I lied," he admitted bitterly. "Said you were just a friend." I looked down for a second. That hurt, even though I expected it. Callum noticed immediately. "Bennett." "No, it's okay. It's not." Silence settled between us heavily. Then he laughed once under his breath, humorless. Jude kept pushing, though, asking why I smiled every time you texted. Callum rubbed his face tiredly. "Then my mom asked if you were the girl from work." My chest twisted painfully. "And?" He looked at me finally. "And I couldn't do it anymore. Everything inside me went still." "What do you mean?" Callum swallowed hard. "I told him there wasn't a girl." I stared at him. And then Jude asked if there was a guy instead. The room suddenly felt too quiet. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Callum's eyes stayed locked on mine when he finally said, and I said yes. I think my brain stopped functioning for a second. I blinked. "You told them?" "Yeah." "How bad was it?" His jaw tightened immediately. There was a lot of yelling. "Of course there was. My dad lost his mind." He continued quietly. "Started asking what the hell happened to me." Anger flared instantly in my chest. Callum noticed. Don't what?" "Get angry for me." "Why not?" "Because I'm too tired already." God, that answer hurt. I moved closer instinctively. "What did your mom say?" His expression cracked slightly then. "She cried." "Damn." Callum looked down at his hands. And Jude kept asking if this was some phase. His laugh sounded hollow now. "Then my dad asked if it was you." I froze. "He knows about me?" "I said your name." The way he said it felt heavy, important, like speaking me into existence around his family changed something permanently. "And then?" I asked softly. Callum finally looked up again. "And then my dad said not to bring you around him." Anger surged through me immediately, but Callum looked so exhausted I swallowed it down. Instead, I asked quietly, "What did you say?" For a second, he just stared at me. Then slowly, I told him he doesn't get to decide who I care about. My chest actually ached hearing that. Callum looked almost surprised he'd said it himself, like the words had escaped before fear could stop them. "You should have seen his face," he muttered, "despite everything." I smiled slightly. "You stood up to him." "Barely. But you did it." His eyes searched mine carefully then, like he expected disappointment, or anger, or regret. Instead, I reached for his hand. Callum gripped mine immediately, tightly. "I'm sorry," he whispered suddenly. "For what?" "For hiding you." That nearly broke me, because he sounded genuinely devastated by it now, not defensive, not uncertain, just ashamed. "You don't have to apologize tonight," I said softly. "Yes, I do." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. That scared me more than the yelling part somehow, because Callum almost never let emotions show openly. "I spent months acting like you only existed when nobody could see us," he admitted quietly. "And tonight when my dad talked about you like you were something dirty," he swallowed hard, "I thought I was going to lose my mind." I squeezed his hand gently. Callum looked down at our fingers intertwined. Then suddenly he laughed softly again.
You know what the stupidest part is?
"What?"
The second I left dinner, all I wanted was to come here. Something about that destroyed whatever walls I still had up emotionally. Because home for him was here now, with me. I moved closer until our knees pressed together. "You okay?" I asked quietly. He answered honestly this time. "No. Come here." Callum didn't hesitate. He pulled me against him immediately, arms wrapping tightly around my waist while he buried his face against my shoulder. And for the first time since I met him, he cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet, shaking breaths against my neck while he held on to me like he was finally allowing himself to fall apart. I stroked my fingers slowly through his hair. "It's okay," I whispered. I thought if I ignored it long enough, maybe none of this would become real. I held him tighter. "But then they talked about you like you were wrong," he said shakily. "And all I could think was how much I love you." My heart stopped. Completely. Callum froze too, like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. The silence afterward felt enormous.
Slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes looked terrified now, completely vulnerable. I didn't mean to. I love you too. The relief that hit his face after that nearly destroyed me. Callum kissed me immediately after, messy, emotional, his hands shaking slightly against my waist. And for the first time since I met him, the kiss felt completely free. No hiding, no pretending, no fear stronger than his feelings anymore. Just Callum finally being real. The next few weeks were messy. Not relationship messy, life messy. Callum's family barely spoke to him after the dinner. His dad stopped calling completely. His brother sent awkward texts every couple days, trying to understand what was going on. His mom checked in constantly, but never actually mentioned me directly. It hurt him more than he admitted. I could tell. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at nothing with that distant look in his eyes, like he was replaying conversations over and over again. But despite all that, something else changed too. He stopped hiding me. Not perfectly, not all at once, but genuinely. The first time it happened, I almost didn't notice. We were standing in line at a coffee shop near my apartment when Callum casually wrapped an arm around my shoulders while talking to me, just instinctively, like he forgot to be afraid for a second. Then I felt him tense, realizing what he'd done. I looked up at him carefully. "You okay?" His eyes flicked around the room nervously for half a second, then back to me, and slowly he nodded. "Yeah." He left his arm there. That tiny moment felt bigger than I could explain, because Callum used to panic over things like that. Now he was learning how not to. A week later, he introduced me to someone from work. Properly. No. Downstairs neighbor. No fake distance. "This is my boyfriend, Bennett." Boyfriend? I swear my brain short-circuited hearing him say it out loud so naturally. Callum noticed my expression immediately after. "What? You said boyfriend." A slow grin spread across his face. "Well, yeah." I laughed softly. "You're smiling like you just won something." Maybe I did. God, I was completely in love with him. And honestly, I think that realization scared me less now. Because Callum wasn't running anymore. One night we ended up back on the fire escape, where all of this basically started. Warm summer air, city lights everywhere. His knee pressed against mine while we shared a cigarette neither of us really wanted. Callum looked calmer lately, still intense, still overthinking everything, but lighter somehow. "You know what's weird?" he asked suddenly. "What?" "I spent years thinking coming out would feel like my life ending." I stayed quiet. He glanced over at me. "But now it kind of feels like my life finally started." That hit me right in the chest. I smiled softly. "That was cheesy." "Shut up. You're becoming emotionally available. It's terrifying." He laughed quietly under his breath before nudging my leg with his. Then, after a pause, he asked, "Were you serious before?" "About what?" "When you said I only felt real around you." I looked at him carefully. "You do feel real around me." Callum stared out over the city for a moment. "Yeah," he admitted softly. "I think you're the first person who ever made me feel safe enough to." Something about hearing that now felt different, because before, Callum hid me from everyone. Now he was finally letting the world see him too. He reached for my hand automatically, intertwining our fingers without hesitation this time. No fear. No checking who might be watching. Just natural. I squeezed his hand gently. "You know," I teased quietly, "you've come a long way from fake girlfriends and panic attacks." Callum groaned dramatically. "Please never mention the fake girl again. What was her fake name?" "I hate you." I laughed hard enough he started laughing too. Then suddenly his expression softened while he looked at me. What? Nothing. Callum. He shook his head once before leaning in slowly and kissing me. Soft, familiar, home. And when he pulled back, he stayed close enough our foreheads rested together like always. I love you, he murmured quietly. Simple now, not terrifying anymore, just true. I smiled against his lips. Good. His arm wrapped around my waist again while the city buzzed below us. And for the first time since I met him, Callum didn't look over his shoulder once.